Now with Sean as a full-fledged member, what's your writing process like?
Well, I think we started refining our writing process. Like when we started, I think I kind of had the idea that we would get in a room more and exchange ideas and come up with parts and stuff like that. I'm not the best improviser. I'm somebody that likes to go home and think about it. So if somebody has an idea, I'll stew on it for a little bit and come back and I'll have a part sort of composed. So we did a little bit of the sorting it out in the jam space, and we still do that for, refining certain parts. And when our drummer Simon starts to get a hold of stuff and make his suggestions and sort of add to the soup, that's still part of the process. But more and more, we'll we'll bring either fully arranged songs or like large bits of songs into the jam space. And towards the end of the recording, like Sean brought, I think, three of the songs like completely arranged. Like The Less Dead, I think he there was a demo, just bass. And then I believe Flat Earth Society, it was a demo, just bass. And then he did like all the instruments with a demo of Irreconcilable. And then we just sort of learned that. We're all pretty busy just with lives and jobs and family and sort of stuff like that. So I think we're learning to be a little bit more economical with our time. And if there's more work that can be done at home, I'm realizing that, I have a lot more time at home on my own than I do with the other guys in the jam space. So we just kind of have to maximize our time. So now if I if I'm able to fully flesh something out more, the better, just because we don't have a ton of time when we do get together. So I think it's moving towards more, and I'll say fully fleshed out, quote unquote, songs being brought to the jam space. Because when we do bring it to the jam space, or when our drummer Simon has listened to it and he comes with his parts, he'll often have a different take on what we're doing, and he'll breathe a different life into it, give it a different vibe or feeling, and bring it in a different direction, and it sort of gives it a new life. Or he'll say, why don't we play this 5 times instead of 4 times or whatever, right? And we'll kind of spiff it up from there. But we have the often the real basis of the meat and potatoes of the riffs and stuff.
I'm curious when you bring in arranged songs to the rehearsal space, are you doing guitar demos or are you doing like guitars with drum machines, or like what format or how fleshed out are the songs when you bring them to the rest of the band?
Well, for me, not I'm getting better at demoing. So Sean, having this studio background, he would have like a click track and a bass usually. But for me, I was making sort of these cheesy garage band demos. And over the pandemic, I learned about Guitar Pro. Well, actually, I knew about it before, but I actually paid for it and learned how to use it properly. And so now I can create with my really kind of basic, like remedial drum programming. I can come up with something that has guitar, bass, and drums on it. But on the past album, the guys had to kind of suffer through my pretty basic skills in demo recording, unfortunately.
So let's jump to talking about Regrets. Regrets is the name of your second album, and it was released at the end of November. We spoke a little bit about how your sound and your songwriting has changed since Sean came aboard. We didn't really speak much about your new drummer, Simon. When did Simon join the band? When and how, I guess, did Simon join the band?
So we parted company with our last drummer shortly after the release of the first album. And we were kind of going through a mental Rolodex of who plays drums in town. And I thought I knew a lot of folks. Like my thought was that if somebody were good, I would know them because they'd be playing out in a band. I just, thought that I would know them. And then Sean said, well, I know this guy, Simon. We used to play botch covers together. And that piqued my interest for a couple of reasons. One, I really like botch. And number two, if you can play that, you can play our music, right? And, if Sean was playing with him, it would be good, right? Like if he was playing botch covers with Sean would know what sounds good, right? So he was able to vouch that this guy knows what he's doing. So the tall man came into our lives. We met and got to know each other, and he learned all of our songs in very, 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 very quickly. And so I think that was maybe like October 2019, and we were playing shows by December. So we really kind of hit the ground running, and we're writing songs, I want to say maybe if not by December, maybe January of 2020. So we hit the ground running, and then everything was kind of full tilt. We're playing shows, and then the brakes kind of got applied with the pandemic. And it was also a bonus too, because he wasn't a known commodity to me. So it was like, okay, well, can you learn these songs? And it was like, yep, could totally do it. And then it was like, okay, well, how are you playing live? And picked it up, super reliable, rock steady, like great. So often when I've been playing, I've had a lot of concern before playing shows about the other people. It's like, geez, is the drummer gonna lag behind, or is the whatever insert the name of the instrument, is this person going to be sober enough to play, or this or that? And now I've only got to worry about myself, not the being sober part, but the like am I gonna be able to live up to my end of the bargain? So that was kind of nice. So yeah, total pro in every aspect. So very pleasant surprise, and that's allowed me to again sit back and play some textures over the top and allow the rhythm section to run away with it sometimes.
That's great. You mentioned that you started work on this possibly at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020. When were you done? When did you have all the songs finished?
Oh boy, I think we have all the songs finished. Well, we went into the studio in February of this year, but I think we had the songs all done by the end of 2021. Like we did pre-production for this album. And I mean, my understanding of dates just with the pandemic are kind of all over the place, so I could be completely wrong about this. But before we went into our first lockdown, I think we had like 7 or 8 songs in various stages of completion. And then we just had to learn the other 3. So I think they were actually written, maybe they were all done being written maybe halfway through 2021 or something like that. That's my best recollection, but I could be off by, several months. I'm sure the other guys will kick me in the ass and tell me I got that wrong.
At the beginning of our conversation, we spoke a little bit about how Alienator sound has been changing, or has changed from the first album to this current album. What would you say the biggest difference is between the 2 albums?
I find that this album is definitely much more cohesive thematically. Like our first album, we had songs about, well, a song about, the reptilians, or like L. Ron Hubbard, or this or that. Like it was a little kind of all over the place, not only musically, but kind of thematically. Whereas this album is, more about personal or social issues. And it has it's just more unified themes and more of a vibe. There's still a lot of differences between, the tempos of different songs, and there's still a lot of variety there, but there's kind of one sort of unified feeling, the kind of dread and claustrophobia that's been bred by the pandemic and the times we're living in.
So as you mentioned, Sean has his own studio, Exit Music.
That's right.
How long did it take for you guys to record the album?
The actual recording of the album, we started in February 2022, and I think we were finally done tweaking it maybe like May or June. So we did a lot of work on pre-production. Like we practiced click tracks. We went through a whole demoing process. So when it came time to actually lay down the tracks, it happened pretty quickly. The reason, and I mean, when people hear that and they're like, well, quickly, and it's like, 6-7 months or whatever, we had the luxury of not having to do it all in one stretch. So Simon did his drums over a couple of days, but I was able to come in, a couple days a week and work on guitar for a couple of hours, like when I had time and things like that. So it went a lot quicker than it has in the past. We sort of found our groove in the studio, but the times that we're able to get together are a lot more spaced out just due to scheduling and things like that. It's not the type of thing where it's like, okay, we're gonna have a month of studio time and we're gonna work 9 to 5, and then it's gonna be done. And I mean, really, I don't know anybody that takes a month in the studio. Usually it'd be more like, we got 5 days of 9 to 5 or whatever. But we had the luxury of being able to space it out and things of that nature. So it came together pretty quickly when it was time to get into the studio.
Sean engineered and mixed the album, but you guys sent it to someone else to master it. Do you want to mention who that person is?
That would be Brad Boatwright of Audio Siege. The man.
And why Brad?
Because he's the man. He's just, I mean, whenever I'm sort of doing, research on who does what on albums, like that's one of the names that kept coming up, and it turned out that, he was somebody that we were able to work with, and he just makes records sound really, really good. So, I mean, I don't know why we would go to anybody else, really.
Did he also work on the first album?
He did, yeah.
I mean, other than making your music sound good, what would you say Brad Boatwright brings to your sound?
He makes it loud, makes it crushing, makes everything pop, allows you to be able to hear all the sort of nuances. When you're filling out your little sheet there with Audio Siege, he asks, are you happy with the mix? In our case, we said yes. So he just amplified everything that we liked about the mix. If we came in with the terrible mix, then he would have done some fixing and tweaking in post. But since we had a mix that we liked, he just kind of made everything explode in our ear holes.
I mean, that's an interesting, because that's actually come up before. I spoke with a band recently, and they said that the reason, what they wanted from the mastering was for it to sound more like the mix, which is, as somebody who's not really that familiar with the mixing or mastering process, it is kind of a funny thing for me to hear that you sent it to someone else to make it sound more like what it already is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like just seeing it in 3D. It's just like a little bit brighter. It's just you're seeing what's already there, or you're hearing what's already there. So I can totally understand. I can totally understand what that person's saying, for sure.